We are to be back again. Not just in this house, but to even be in your house right now, in your space, your place, wherever that may be. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. We are so privileged to have you with us today, and we don't take that for granted. And should this moment be a blessing to you, why don't you make sure you share it with someone? Tell them to chime in, to tune in, join us. With that being said, we want to move swiftly and quickly with our time together. Even now, Lord, even now. Yes. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. We started out week before last looking at a dual view of two different stories, or isolated stories, if I can say it that way, that really were questioning the issue of judging. I want to stay on that subject of judging. For those of us that have a lesson, you don't have to worry about reading anything now. The fact's about it, put it to the side, because I need your listening ear, because we need to think about something that gives us an inroads into our lesson today. So if you got your lesson, put it to the side. Let me have your eyes and your ears. A grocery store checkout clerk once wrote to advice columnist Ann Landers to complain that she had seen people buy quote-unquote luxury food items like birthday cakes and bags of shrimp with their food stamps. The writer went on to say that she thought all of those people on welfare who treated themselves to such non-necessities were lazy and wasteful. A few weeks later, Mrs. Landers' column was devoted entirely to people who had responded to the grocery clerk's remarks. One woman wrote, I didn't buy a cake, but I did buy a big bag of shrimp with food stamps. So what? My husband had been working at a plant for 15 years when it shut down. The shrimp casserole that I bought was made for our wedding anniversary dinner, and it lasted 3 days. Perhaps the grocery clerk who criticized that woman would have a different view of life after walking a mile in my shoes. Another lady wrote, I'm the woman who bought the $17 cake and paid for it with food stamps. I thought the checkout clerk woman in the store would burn a hole through me with her eyes. What she didn't know is the cake was for my little girl's birthday. It will be her last. She has bone cancer and will probably be dead within 6 to 8 months. You never know what other people are dealing with. Get all the facts before you condemn someone or make a fool out of yourself. Let's talk for a minute. In those two stories, or in the whole story, what do you hear? What do you hear? Someone? Yes, ma'am. Judgment. You hear judgment. It's just kind of like a flashlight in a dark room. It just shines all over this whole scenario. Yeah. Anyone else? Someone else? Someone? You said judgment. Anyone else?
Someone making assumptions without knowing the whole story.
All right, someone making assumptions without knowing the whole story. How easy it is to slip into that element of attitude and mindset and don't have all of the facts. That doesn't happen. That's just something we just read about, right? I mean, good Christians, they don't do those kinds of things to one another or to other people, right? Yeah. Yes. Wrong. It happens. And unfortunately, it's mercilessness. It doesn't have any mercy in it at all. Jumping to conclusions, not knowing really anything about what is really going on. Someone else. Yes, ma'am, real loud.
Really none of her business.
Really was none of her business. Just like it's not none of a whole lot of nosy people's business when they all up in your business. Amen. Oh, it's going to get good today.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Bible is clear, and Bert, when it says, study to keep your mouth closed and mind your own business. And that wasn't written to people out in the street. It's written to people who go to church like me and you.
Yes, sir.
And let me say this, just because people go to church does not mean they are Christians.
No.
Just because people go to church does not mean that they are saved.
Yeah.
I tell you what I hear. I hear stereotype.
Yeah.
People on welfare. Lazy is what she said, and wasteful.
Yeah.
That is so far from the truth. Just because there might be some people who take advantage of the system doesn't mean everyone else is like a few others. Amen. Just like we see young men who bust aside, whose breeches, as my grandmama would say, whose pants are well below the mark of the low calling. Amen. Doesn't mean that every young man is without a belt or does not appreciate groomed look.
Yeah.
Yes.
As the old expression was,
Turn your mic on.
as the old expression was, they're judging a book by its cover instead of reading it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Very good point. Very good point. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Real loud.
But also, if you're on welfare, you're not allowed to have certain things.
Okay.
That's
All
what
right.
they were saying.
That there are restrictions.
Yeah, that's
However, the checkout clerk is not there to determine or to decide what somebody puts on the belt. You're just there to do a job, not to decide what somebody's worth and value is because they've got to have government assistance. Let me help y'all to understand. Before it's all over, we don't know how we gonna end up. And let me tell you something. I'll pull out and I can get some help on either watching or either in the house. I can remember the day when we had government grants. They were yellow. Government cheese. See, I know I had some help on here. Had that big brick. And somebody said, Pastor made the best grilled cheese sandwiches. And I say, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. Amen. Praise God. Lord. Amen. Can I get a cheese sandwich? I mean, can I get an amen?
Yeah.
The reality of the matter is that we know about canned peanut butter, powdered milk, powdered eggs. Now, some of us aren't willing to tell on ourselves, but it does not mean that it ain't true. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, too, she's not thinking that could be her.
Amen. Be careful. Be careful. Because you don't know how you're going to end up. Yes, ma'am.
Could it be the checkout operator was looking down on the person?
Absolutely.
Stamps?
Yes, ma'am. Which also leads into a second point, and that is personal biases and personal prejudices. If we're not careful, we can classify the worth and the value of people based on what they drive, what they wear, what kind of house they live in, and what side of town they live on.
Yeah.
Y'all let me know when y'all live. We have to be very careful that we are not bringing personal biases and personal prejudices in when it comes to this matter of judging. Which I want you to turn in your Bible to Matthew chapter 7. And as I said, we're going to work our way not just through this text and maybe a couple of other texts in a couple of weeks. We'll be on this for a couple of weeks. But there are some principles that I believe are very important that will help us to to move in a right and a righteous direction. Chapter 7 of Matthew. Let me start at verse 1 through 5. Here's the text. New American Standard Version says, "Do not judge, so that you will not be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye?
Yes, sir.
Or how can you say to your brother, let me take out the speck of your eye, and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite.
Yeah.
You actor out on the stage. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye."
Yeah.
Let's look at this lesson. How easy it is to do and yet be so wrong. To judge is to form an opinion or to come to a conclusion about something or someone, or determining a person's motive without knowing or having all of the facts. More often than not, Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 through verse number 5 and following have been the anchor text that people have run to. They've remembered when they wanted to escape someone who is judging them.
Yeah.
Well, Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 through 5 is one of the most widely quoted phrases, and it is one of the most misinterpreted, misunderstood, and misapplied statements of Jesus. Let me have your attention, quick reading for a second. Jesus is issuing a warning, okay? But he is not just throwing some blanket warning up out in the air and hope that whoever will catch it, who it applies to, that is going, no. You got to understand, Jesus knows who's doing it.
Yes.
And Jesus knows who is actively and aggressively involved in it. Don't read your lesson, please. Jesus is indirectly talking to a group of religious people known as the Pharisees.
Yes, sir.
That's why I get concerned when I hear people talk about they are religious. You can be religious and unsaved.
Very much so.
You can be religious without a Jesus focus.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can be religious with an uppity, snooty attitude.
Yeah.
And this is what the Pharisees prided themselves on. Facts about it, this was an ongoing, this was a common practice of theirs. To make themselves big at the littleness of others as they saw it. That they felt significant on the insignificance of someone else. It's almost as though one would say,
Yeah.
because I can do better than somebody else, that makes me better than who they are. You got to understand, your skill set, your skill level does not determine your quality of person.
Amen.
Your quantitative, how much you can do, does not set you apart to say that you are better than other people who can't do as much as you. To whom much is given, much is required. But it does not give one a license for boasting, nor does it give one a license to belittle or look down on someone who may not be where they may be.
Yeah.
Let me even say this. I'm glad that you know at least 6 books out of the 66 books of the Bible that you can quote 6 Bible verses. You know where Jesus was born, where he died and rose again. But that doesn't necessarily suggest or say that you are a better Christian than somebody else.
Yeah.
Let's look back at the lesson. Jesus is not commanding us to never judge. Let's be clear. But rather he is challenging our heart as we walk through judgment. He is not saying that you cannot make judgment calls Just make sure that your heart is right, and so are your motives. Before we seek to call out another brother or sister's sin, we must first check the motives and the intentions of our heart. Why are you doing what you are doing? Your whys will outweigh your whats. Jesus' sharp key here is to keep us from rushing to make decisions from others wrong by putting and helping us to keep from putting our foot in our mouth. And ultimately it comes down to this. If we're not repentant, if we're not humble as we walk through holding someone else accountable, the judgment is going to fall back on our own heads. Those who mishandle this verse often use it as a shield for sin, a barrier to keep others at bay, allowing them to justify living as they moral boundaries or accountability. Their objections sound like this. Aren't we all sinners? You heard that before?
Oh, yeah.
What gives us the right to make moral judgments about someone else? Isn't that God's job? And Tupac said, God will judge us.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, when we take a closer look at the context, the total text, not just a few verses and then build a case on it, or some new theology, or some new Bible teaching, you got to take the whole text in the framework of what Jesus is saying. And the teachings of Scripture and the rest of Scripture. It is clear that this verse cannot be used to substantiate unrestrained moral freedom and independence. This was not Jesus' intent. He was not advocating a hands-off approach to moral accountability, refusing to allow anyone to make moral judgments in any sense. Quite the opposite. Jesus was explicitly rebuking the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, who were quick to see the sins of others, but they were blind and unwilling to hold themselves accountable, watch this, to the same standard that they were imposing on everyone else. Let me have your attention. Does that not happen today?
Yes.
It's one thing to have an expectation of someone else, but then make allowances for your own fault, flaws, and failures. You know, but I'm human, so am I. The Lord ain't through with me yet. Come on, let's just talk about some of these statements that folk make. Well, the Lord is still working on me. Like he ain't working on me. If he working on you, did he tell you he was finished with them?
No.
And if God is doing the work, God is more than able. He don't need none of us to point out somebody else's flaw when we got either the same or as many. As, you know, that's just like somebody saying, you know, they so cuss a lot. They cuss like a sailor. While the person talking about somebody cussing like a sailor, they cuss like a Marine. I mean, come on. It's like the pot calling the kettle black. That's what we say underneath, when both of them got built up underneath. I think it's important that we understand that when we look at this lesson and when we look at what Jesus is saying, Jesus is saying that we are not off limits to making judgment. He is not saying that we should not make judgment. He is saying how you make judgment is critical to biblical or non-biblical judgment. Okay? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Jesus was explicitly rebuking, listen again, the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. Stop right there. Because when you walk down the text, why does Jesus, let me put my glasses on, in verse 5, as a summary statement for classification and identification purposes, say, for those that are engaging and involved in this kind of practice and ongoing behavior, he calls them what he sees them.
Yeah.
Hypocrite.
Yeah.
Actor out on the stage, wearing a mask
Yeah.
that doesn't reveal their real identity on the outside, because again, the inside is concealed or covered while the mask says something else. Jesus is saying these religious hypocrites are mask wearers.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying. We don't have mask wearers today, of course. No. Yes, we do.
Yes. Yeah.
All the time. There is not a church that ain't got at least one mask wearer.
Amen.
Who with a white glove test can find dirt on somebody else, but never does the white glove test on him or herself.
Yeah.
There's always something wrong with the program. There's always something wrong with the church. There's always something wrong with the way they see it. And if you're not careful, there can be created in many of our churches hypocrite clubs.
Yeah.
People that get pulled in by others who think a certain way to get them to think that way as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's just what the Pharisees were. You could join the club if you didn't meet certain criteria.
Yeah.
You gonna stand up to a Pharisee and tell them they're wrong? You ain't, now you can't, now your membership gets revoked.
Yeah.
Same way it is in church. There are some people who need to be stood up to and said to them, don't bring that here.
Yeah.
It's awful quiet in here.
Yeah.
That's why I said last week before last, you should not be a part of the Veronica group.
Yeah.
That allow other folk to pull you to the side, fill you in with stuff about somebody, be in your church or out, and then you go take it to Mary, only to use Mary as a dump site, and then the other folk that filled you up only use you as a carrier so that they can be clean and unidentified. Call them out.
Yeah.
Don't talk about, well, I heard what? Are you schizophrenic, paranoia?
Yeah.
You suffering and need some psychology or some psychiatrist?
Yeah.
We know people who do talking.
Yes.
Call them out.
Yeah.
Name them.
Yeah.
Name the spineless, gutless Casper people. That's exactly what I said. Because if they got any Christ-likeness in them, they would have read Matthew chapter 18. If you got an alt with your brother, go to him or sister alone.
Yeah.
It didn't say send an emissary or send some carrier so that you can get your point across and then let them come back and report to you what they said.
Yeah.
That's what the Pharisees were doing.
And Pastor.
Yes, real quick, put your mic on.
Some people will say, I'm just stating my opinion. It's just my opinion, and I'm allowed to state my opinion. I'm not judging you. It's just my opinion.
Well, watch that. Because here's a couple of things you need to think about. What are they using to establish an opinion?
Yes.
Yeah. How well have they studied you and the situation to even have an opinion?
Right.
And I always like to ask, how long you been thinking? You didn't wake up this morning thinking like that.
No. You
didn't roll out the bed yesterday feeling like that. So how long have you been harboring that?
Mm-hmm.
has the Holy Spirit said to you about it?
Yeah.
Has he convicted you about it?
Yes.
Are you willing to let it go? Are you willing to deal righteously about it? Very good point. Very good point. Yes, ma'am. Real quick.
And even at the top of our lesson, it says to judge is to form an opinion without knowing or having all the facts.
Yes.
Think about that. Think about how, very good point. This is good. How many people who are dead in the eyes of other folk who they've done nothing to because some people have killed their character and ruined their reputation because they got a problem with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Y'all wake up. I mean, because this is a reality. I want to tell you, some things been said about you. You ain't gonna never find out who carried it. But it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate when you trust people to be upfront with you when they are conniving and two-faced.
Yeah.
That's what Jesus is referring to here. Let's look back at the lesson. Jesus rebukes the Pharisees for their blatant hypocrisy and impossible man-made standards. They were notorious for condemning the shortcomings of others when all the time and all the while they were the ones who stood condemned because they were doing the very same thing.
Yeah.
How ridiculous. Jesus said to that judgment always reciprocates. In other words, the measuring stick that they use to measure the lives of others will be the same measuring stick held up against their lives by God himself. Okay. And we know God doesn't have to lean on what he heard. It's what he sees and what he knows. He can see in the heart where our eyes will never go. Consider this. It's one thing to be judged by your fellow man, but it's quite another to be judged by God himself.
Yeah.
Notice that Jesus says the hypocrite will be the one with a bigger problem. Why? Because their sin was not merely comparable to a speck of dust. It was more like a wooden plank. Quite a difference. They refused to take it out. Here's the irony. Here's where it's like sarcasm. Jesus says, look at the text. Now, I want you to really capture this. Why do you look at the speck, let's say the toothpick, that is in your brother's eye? Don't run past that. That word brother insinuates or asserts relationship.
Yeah.
It didn't say straight. He didn't say stranger.
No.
You got to capture this. Oh my Lord. You got a brother or a sister that's in your church or in your circle that has a flaw.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is that you got a telephone pole in your own. How do you see that clear to get a toothpick out of somebody's eye while you got a telephone pole in yours? Hello? Come on, class.
Yeah.
Somebody help me. You know, how do you look past what's already there with you to focus more on what's in somebody else? Yes, ma'am.
Because you are looking past. That's right. You are looking past.
You are looking past. Thank you, Sister Brown, for enlightening my understanding. But I still raise a question. How possible is it? Yeah, we ignore it. Okay.
Yeah.
I wish somebody, if you got a question, please make sure you send it this way. We're going to answer it. Because these are this is not just some Bible issue. You're dealing with people. Watch this. People that should know better because they say they know God. Saying one knows God does not mean that they've got a relationship with God.
Amen.
Got a speck in my brother's eye. But I got this beam in mine, and I'm ignoring it. How can you have such large problem with yourself and focus on the smaller problems of somebody else? Yes, ma'am.
Because if I'm focusing on you, I don't have to look at myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
That's the purpose of it in the first place.
That's the purpose of it in the first place.
Yeah.
Do y'all want to finish teaching this lesson? I'm learning from y'all. I mean, think about that. Diverting one's attention. You know what? Can I add to that? Some people have honed their skills of learning how to live beyond self-examination.
Yeah.
Because after all, they are all right in and of themselves. Ain't nothing wrong with them. They don't have no problems. They don't have no shortcomings. And this is really the reverse order of what Jesus is saying. Because you would think you got that big of an issue. How do you not see it? You run your mouth. You gossip. You put people down. You got a negative attitude. How do you not see it? Nothing good comes out of your mouth when it comes to people in church.
Yeah.
You're always evaluating and casting judgment. How do you not see that? How do you not hear yourself talk?
Yeah.
Or do you not want to hear yourself talk?
Yeah.
Here's where it gets worse. Is when you got somebody who even supports and signs off on the log in your eye.
Yeah.
You got a right to think that way.
Yeah.
Not by biblical standards.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And if we go by 1 Corinthians 11 chapter, it says, let a man examine himself. No one wants to do self-examination. They don't want to examine their faults,
Wow.
themselves. They just want to cast blame.
Wow. Which then continues to further, the problem never gets solved.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The issue might even enlarge.
Yeah.
We don't.
And facts about it, if it's in the eye, that means that they are blind.
That's right.
Yeah.
They can't even see it.
They can't even see it.
They can't see the speck.
They can't see what their fault. Maybe they just don't want to.
Yeah.
How many people keep making excuses and telling lies for the way they are because they don't want to change? Oh, there it is, right there. There it is, right there. Because it means that if the log is going to come out, something is going to have to change. They are going to have to change. They're going to change the way they look at people, look at situations, look at things. And some people are so settled in the way they are. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter how old you are. You are never so old that you cannot change. You don't change because you don't want to change.
Yeah.
You love being the way you are. I think that's, yes, ma'am.
And you were talking about this is a relationship situation. Well, I see hurt here, and I see a breakaway in the situation.
Wow. Because this relationship, brother, is the word used, out of false, people who come out of the same womb. Yeah. Family, relations. Yeah. Wow. And yet there is hurt, pain being imposed on the person who has the larger problem.
Yeah.
You don't think the person with the speck don't see the log in their eye? Absolutely. It's almost like, okay, how are you going to tell me
Yeah.
about what's wrong with me You really don't want to, and we say, you really don't want to go there. When there are some issues with you haven't even addressed.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Come on. Talk loud.
And then verse 5 clearly says, fix yourself first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Then you can fix me.
Wow.
You can't even see clearly enough to fix me.
Right.
Because of your own.
Look at the irony of it.
Your own fault.
Look, I mean, we're just trying to explode the text because there's so much that is in it. Again, let's, in light of what Sister said, look at where Jesus says improvement begins.
Yeah.
Before I can help somebody else, I need to be helped. There ain't a person in here, I start the line that needs some improvement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lord. Yeah, that's right.
Consider this. It's one thing to be judged by your fellow man, it's another thing to be judged by God. But notice that Jesus says the hypocrite will be the one with the bigger problem because their sin was not merely comparable to a speck of dust. It was more like a wooden plank, and that's different. And they refused. He didn't say they couldn't.
Yeah.
He said they refused.
Don't want to.
Don't want to.
Yeah.
Don't want to stop being how they are.
Yeah.
What this means is that the greater judgment is reserved for the one who has purposefully overlooked his or her own huge sin while pointing out the smaller sins of others. Jesus emphatically says that this must change, so he gives two commands. Stop judging others in a hypocritical fashion, and then get the sin out of your own life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Yet, let's be clear. Jesus is not suggesting that we have no right to make moral judgments about human behavior. And he is certainly not suggesting that we have no right to hold others accountable. But it is of little help or value to approach a Christian brother or sister about their specific sin, even if you should do it the right way, if you're committing the very same sin and are unwilling to address it or
Yes.
break free from it.
Yes. Yes.
Powerful lesson, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Well, there is a second part to this. And I listed, and I have some commentary to a few of these that I'd like to share with you. That there are two types or kinds of judgment. Number one, condemning judgment versus discerning judgment. Second, number two, quick versus careful.
Right.
3, focus on others' faults versus examining self. 4, generalizations versus individual. Number 5, gossip, assumptions, appearances versus benefit of the doubt, observations, and questions. Number 6, legalistic versus gracious. Number 7, motives versus actions. Let me share with you just a few of these by way of commentary, and I pray they be of help to you. Condemning judgment versus discerning judgment. When a new person joins a church, or oftentimes when change is implemented in a church, typically, there are two responses that take place. Some people make it their responsibility to identify what's wrong with the plan. Others are excited to discover the new benefits and opportunities that change brings to the church.
Yeah.
People who tend to find fault often act like they have helped everybody out by uncovering a faulty program, a faulty person, a faulty pastor, or a faulty plan. The truth of the matter is this. You can always find something wrong with anything, any program, any person, any pastor, any plan. But if finding out what's wrong is your primary motivation and focus, then you cheat yourself and everybody else out of the opportunity to learn and grow and benefit from what God has brought into the life of the church or even into your own life. Are you one that always tends to search for what's wrong with it? If you are, then stop it. Stop judging. Thank God for people who can see the potential pitfalls in a plan. Discernment is a helpful skill and a positive contribution. Good judgment is a valuable quality. But some people miss the distinction between discernment and condemnation. They elevate fault finding to a ministry as if they were doing the church a favor or doing society a favor or doing their spouse a favor by making it their goal to find out what's wrong. It's very legit to ask questions like, can we do this? Should we do this? How will we do it?
Yes.
Or what problems need to be solved in order to get it done? But all of that is different than searching for faults and focusing on weaknesses, intentionally championing or making it your personal mission to solve problems instead of seeking and supporting solutions. One is the gift of discernment, and that's good judgment. Discernment means, to distinguish, to separate out by diligent search, to examine. Discernment is the ability to properly discriminate or make determinations, and it is related to wisdom. The other is the destruction of condemnation, and that is the kind of judgment that Jesus says does not belong in the church, and it doesn't belong in our lives.
Yeah.
Then there is quick judgment and careful judgment. Quick judgment is exactly what it is. Quick to judge. Making determinations without having complete fact or facts. Jesus speaks against this. Look back at your text. At verse 1 and 2. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. For in the way that you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Quick judgment can also be distorted or stained judgment. Quick judgment can also be rash and irrational judgment. Quick judgment can also come on the fly of feelings.
Yeah.
Well, I ain't feeling that. But there's some things that ain't meant to be felt. There's some things that are meant to be done.
Yeah.
Okay? It's making a decision from a lopsided perspective.
Yeah.
Not seeing clearly as one should because their vision limits their ability to do so, which could also entail or involve negative feelings about a person, about a matter, their unwillingness to move on from the past, or not having their way, or something going according to the way they want it to. Careful judgment is exactly what it is. It's careful.
Yeah.
Not willing to make conclusions concerning a person or matter without complete facts. Not having decided because it's what others say or how others see it, but taking into one's own personal consideration by looking at for himself or herself, weighing the options and matter well. Careful judgment is prayerful judgment.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why it pays the P-R-A-Y, not P-R-E-Y.
Yeah.
You know there's a difference, right?
Oh, big difference.
Homonyms.
Yeah.
It's easy to judge each other hastily, to assign motives and to focus on everything we don't like about the other person. But when we judge hastily like that, the Bible says that we create an environment of unfair criticism and that we are very likely to experience unfair criticism directed back at us. You know what I find interesting? Is for some one-on-ones who are involved in this kind of judgment mentality, they can't handle it when it comes back on them.
No. They can dish it out.
They can dish it out,
They can't take
but
it.
they can't take it.
That's right.
You know, there's a thing called boomerang.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You ever notice, or have you ever watched one? You can even Google it and put in the search bar how a boomerang works, and they'll give you a visual of somebody who is skilled.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta have skill to know how to handle a boomerang. Just like you gotta have skill to have the kind of critical mentality and judgment like what we're talking about. Yeah. It's one thing to throw it out and it hits somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes back.
But what happens? When is your turn?
Yeah.
Some of y'all are smart.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say whatever you have on your mind, what you've assessed, determined, evaluated, concluded about the motive of someone else. But what happens when someone does the same thing to you?
Yeah.
And one of the first things that'll be hollered out, oh, they aren't God, and neither were you.
Yeah.
How easy it is, come on and talk to me, y'all.
Yeah.
To get caught up and consumed in that kind of destructive behavior. And yet Jesus says, these are his own words, it will come back. He didn't say when. He didn't say from whom. He didn't say what day.
Yeah.
But he did say, for those who engage intentionally and purposefully in that kind of ongoing activity. Class, understand, this is not a mistake.
Yeah.
This is not an accident. However, we have settled on in terms of making judgment calls. We did that many times without the help of somebody else.
Yeah.
Now, let's be clear. Where we cannot look into the heart of someone and make a judgment call. Are y'all still here? Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
You can't tell me you love the church and won't give nothing.
Yeah. Amen.
That's right, Ashley, cranking it up. You can't tell me you love the church and do everything you can to not support the program of the church.
Yeah.
That would be like me making grand announcements about how much I love my wife, and I sure love that girl. But I don't do nothing with her. I don't do nothing for her. I don't take her nowhere. But all I do is make these grand announcements about I love her. At some point, the people who hear me make these statements are going to start looking at what I do and start weighing what I say. And what I don't do in light of what I say, they ain't got time to hear them lies. That's fair. If you're going to say you love the church, your money ought to be in it. Your love for God and service ought to show, not talk about it, be about it. You know, in some outside organizations, if you don't ever show up to any of the meetings, and if you don't pay the dues or the membership fees, you out. You out. The church is the only place I know where folk want to stay on the road, don't give nothing and don't show up, and still want to be a member.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at what's going on here. Jesus says that if you are involved in quick judgment versus careful judgment, you need to stop it. And then there is focused on others' faults versus examining self. I need you to look at and listen to the irony and the ridiculousness with which Jesus makes this statement of comparison in verse number 3. Why do you look at the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Here's the question. How can this blind person see so well what is wrong with another person, and yet on the other hand is so blind to their own faults?
Yeah.
I said earlier by way of contrast comparison. There's somebody who's got as much of a filthy mouth as a cussing Marine, as a cussing sailor.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine what it look like is? Oh, you cuss worse than a sailor. Like, what? Have you ever heard how you talk?
Yeah.
Have you heard the stuff come out of your mouth? How in the world?
Yeah.
You gonna talk about my level of cussing? Come on, y'all.
Yeah.
Do you ever hear?
What comes out?
Come here. How many people spend time thinking and listening to the negativity that comes out of their mouth?
Yes.
As opposed to somebody else? Is it fair? Absolutely not. Well, how can a blind person see so well there's something wrong with somebody else, but never see their own faults? Maybe the telling question is this: how would you like it? In other words, if it was you and somebody else was writing up an action plan for how to treat you, what would you like? What would you omit? How would you like to be treated? What would you like the other person to do for you? What would you prefer? The focus Jesus points out is a distorted focus, because that's exactly what it is. Saying one sees when they really don't. How could they? They're blind. Well, let's talk for a second. What are some beams that get in our eyes that prevent us from seeing us? Jesus, come on, y'all, come on, don't let me down now. What are some beams?
Our own faults.
Yeah, faults of our own. Thank you. That's one. What are some beams that get in our own way that keep us from seeing ourselves? Pride. Yeah.
Complacency.
Complacency. Yes, ma'am. Selfishness. What about dishonesty?
Yeah.
What about unwillingness to be true to ourselves as the Lord revealed us to us? In Isaiah chapter 6, verse 6, when Isaiah had that epic moment when he stood before the Lord, Isaiah, we don't know if anybody else was in the vision with him, but Isaiah wasn't interested in looking at nobody else, because after he saw God, he says, I looked at me, and I said, woe is me, for I am undone. I'm a man of unclean lips that dwell among dirty people.
Yeah.
He didn't start saying, you know them folk in the choir, they dirty. He didn't say, you know, some of them ushers and some of them other folk, you know, they dirty too. No. The revealing has to first of all begin with us.
Yeah.
Now God will show us
Yes.
But God is not going to make us be the us he wants us to be.
No.
There are some things that get in the way. Unwillingness to change. Superiority of attitude. Thinking that we're better than somebody else.
Yeah.
Meanness. Coldness.
Yeah.
Come on. Let's call it out.
Yeah.
The focus Jesus points out is a distorted focus. And so Jesus provides the cure in verse number 5. Jesus doesn't just point out a problem. I'm glad that he also provides an answer. Because in verse number 5, guess where he begins in solving the problem? With yourself.
Yeah.
And all of us got at least one. One baby.
Yeah.
Thank you, sister. That needs to be removed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not careful, you can get used to being a one-eyed jack.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah? Yes, sir.
As well as one being, it can become two beings and you become totally blind. Right now you're partially blind.
Wow. Jesus gives that person an opportunity, thank you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to have 20/20 vision in both eyes. If you're not careful. Wow. So, yes, ma'am.
And with the beam in my eye, I'm blind, but I'm just blind to you guys looking at me. Because I can see the beam, the speck that's in someone else's eye. But the beam that's in mine, I don't see it.
Wow. Very good. Just thought about something while you were talking. Can I show it to you?
Yeah.
How many people have learned to make adjustments to their handicaps?
Yeah.
Well, at least I can see out of one.
Yeah.
I ain't totally gone all together.
Yeah.
How much better? I mean, are we making excuses to eliminate the change that is needed when we know the change that is needed?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I ain't as bad as somebody else. Yeah, you still a one-eyed jack. And until you see it as the Lord sees it.
Yeah.
Because I've been preaching a long time, and I've come to realize that I can preach or teach some folk into change. And I'm glad that the Lord will hold me accountable for trying to change people. I know a Jesus that came.
Yeah.
Now let me say this. If Jesus has had a problem this long,
Don't be surprised.
if they've been coming to church, and they've been doing all that churchy stuff, but still got babies. Ain't no way that I'm going to think that there's some power invested in me that I'm going to get them to change. Some of them reading self-help books and still ain't changed. Listening to Dr. Phil and still ain't changed. Hello? So the question becomes, what will it take to pull the log out of one's own eye on up to it?
Yeah.
Make a decision today that I'm no longer going to keep making room for one-eyedness. I know, Don, don't worry about looking it up. I just made it up. It's an overism. I know. One-eyedness.
Yeah.
E-Y-E-D-N-E-S-S. It may not be, it's in my dictionary. That's what I just thought of. Until a person sees the need.
Yeah.
Because if it's a matter of talking folk into, they can talk themselves back into what they've been talked out of.
Yeah.
This ain't a matter of talking out of. It's a matter of taking ownership. This needs to stop. I am hindering, handicapping my own self. Watch this. My own spiritual growth. My fellowship with the Lord. Is that not important enough to get the beam out?
Yeah.
It should. You cannot grow with all of that stuff in you. And then lastly, there is generalizations versus individual. Generalizations are like a box cake mix. Everything is included and blended. You don't know what's in the box until you read the label.
Yeah.
More often than not, it happens among people in church, especially when they have a censorious or complaining or accusatory attitude or mentality. If it's not by their standards or plans, then everything and everyone associated with it are their generalizations, conclusions. The problem with this kind of thinking is that it condemns the person or the project without having given them a chance. It's dead before it's given a chance to live.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well, it's that time. Were there any questions today?
You answered them all.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. Wow. Wow. Have you been healed?
Oh, yes.
All right. I pray that this lesson will be a blessing to you, and if it is, you're welcome to even give a gift, even to this church on our Givelify page. You're welcome to do that. But more importantly, I pray that you will pass it on. Let someone know what you heard today and how it helped you.
Yeah.
And how much of a blessing it was to you. Thank you, Father, for our time together. And I pray that your word will be a vehicle of deliverance from not just sin, but even from someone themselves. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.